Published, International Journal of Educational Development, Volume 4 Number 2. Pages 113-121, 1984 printed in Great Britain. Teaching and Management in Education. Can they be the same? H.M. Lulsegged. Department of Educational Management, University of Ibadan, Ibadan, Nigeria. Abstract. In spite of the rapid changes in modern education today, its management appears to have remained the same. Planning and execution of the educational policies in many countries of the world, most especially the third world countries, are poorly organized and generally ill-managed. Although several empirical studies are needed to establish the reason for this, the possibility that the assigning of classroom teachers without any professional management preparation to leadership positions as one of the contributory factors to poor management cannot be ruled out. If this trend continues, and there is every indication that it will, in most third world countries teaching experience alone is still the route to educational leadership positions. We are then left with the inevitable question: can teachers' skills be the same as those required of managers? Consequently, this article attempts to examine and elucidate this problem by analyzing the issue of teaching and of management from the point of view of the basic practitioner's needs and conditions. Introduction. To begin with, if it is assumed that experience alone can be the criterion for getting to the various kinds and levels of educational leadership positions, then this assumption may contradict the up-to-date accepted theories and practices of management acquired through training and application. For instance, to fulfill professional responsibilities, Stoops Edel, 1981, emphasize, the modern administrator must have a well-rounded general education, with intense study in the specialized field of educational administration and supervision. Biddle, 1980, is even blunter when he states that executives are made and not born. They require knowledge of organization through the application of a systematic process of management, and skills such as decision-making, staff building, and information collection and analysis. Duncan, 1978, in support of this, states, at every stage the individual assumes and to a great extent depends on the effective coordination of human effort and non-human resources. This effective coordination does not, of course, just happen. Furthermore, with regard to a school principal, Marx et al., 1978, stress among other things that he, the principal, must possess the knowledge and skills in the area of leadership and human dynamics, since the educational leader's job is to make things happen through the efforts of people. According to these writers, technical competence for the job to be done heads the list of 11 personal characteristics of the most effective and successful educational executive. In other words, managerial competence is a sine qua non for the successful execution of management positions. However, the reader of this paper may think of someone he knows somewhere as a successful educational leader who has had no training in management and may ask, what about such a person? He did not have formal management training to succeed. Granted that in the past we have had some successful teachers who might have made successful educational leaders. This would probably be attributed to the old traditional conception of the nature of education. Previously, formal education was for the very few and it consisted mainly of general literacy. Thus, to a great extent the goal of education then was a simplistic transmission of book knowledge. Consequently, the small-sized educational institutions were more or less successfully run by a colleague, teacher, from among equals, teachers. In such institutions, the number of the teachers often did not exceed a manageable single-digit number. However, in modern times the purposes of education and the accompanying curricula have become more complex and greatly diversified. Literacy alone is no longer adequate to produce the manpower needed for national economic growth. The education of today requires a right mix of knowledge and skill. Democratization of the educational opportunities has resulted in student explosion with a corresponding increase in demand for education, educational facilities, and services. Above all, the academic and professional nature of the educational goals of today have brought together people of diversified specialization to work together to give common efforts for common intentions. Moreover, the teaching population in any given institution of learning is usually estimated in 2 to 3-digit numbers. Thus, management in such a complex organization and greatly expanded services requires professionally skilled people in educational management. Consequently, one is compelled to ask if the classroom teaching experience alone could serve as an adequate prerequisite to enter modern educational management. Paradoxically, today, teachers with teaching experience alone still appear to be selected and promoted to management leadership positions in education, as was the case in the past. Controlling the requirements of this management role, is it possible to identify the reasons why teachers, that is, if it is argued that teaching experience alone is no longer an adequate prerequisite to enter leadership in education, still enter management and survive? Could answer be that we cannot readily distinguish the good, the relevant, and the positive achievement from the mediocre in the realm of education? Or B, that we have no other reliable procedure for evaluating what good management in education is? Could the answer also be that in whatever manner the instructional inputs are managed, the educational institutions trudge along and some kind of teaching and learning goes on, as Inbar, 1982, put it? The self-operated character of the school endows the formal school system with a high survival factor, even under conditions where other organizational systems would be unable to operate. Constraints in the demand for education. Previously, parents, especially in the third world countries, were complacent to see their children in school, if only they could secure this. They appeared never to question the authority of the school or think of holding anybody there responsible for what might happen to their children because, among other things, education was, and still is to a great extent, a luxury and a privilege rather than a birthright of each individual child, and consequently parents seem to fear that their children will be sent out of school if they tried to interfere. The great majority of the parents themselves were not adequately educated to understand what is involved in their children's education, particularly in the modern educational system. Consequently, they appeared to fear that they would be exposing their ignorance if they questioned the school authorities. 3. The tradition of secular schools where the teacher was the unquestionable authority of the school and the community seemed still to linger, in spite of the dramatic changes brought by the knowledge explosion. Thus, teacher managers seem to get along and go on with the management responsibilities without a great deal of challenge from parents for their success or failure in fulfilling their duties. Is this kind of acquiescence expected to go on much longer? The answer is definitely no. Already parents are becoming active in school affairs and interested in their children's day-to-day education. For example, American parents everywhere seem to be becoming increasingly vocal about educational issues. The Gallup poll of 1970 in the United States of America reported that 67%, Gronland, 1974, of that country's adults believed that teachers and their administrators should be held accountable for the progress of their students. This trend is catching up very fast in other countries too. It is becoming clear, therefore, that modern education may no longer be a simple business which any teacher without professional training and qualification in educational management can comfortably handle. Expenditure and goals of education. It is interesting to note, too, that expenditure for education in most countries seems not commonly measured against goal achievement in terms of behavioral changes in students. Auditors for educational expenditure appear to be interested in examining receipts and account books for proper credit and debit entry, without any due regard to the expenditure's relationship to the achievement of educational objectives. Could this then be one of the hidden reasons why the success or failure in achieving the desired educational goals is not revealed for teachers in management position? That is, of course, assuming teaching is not the same as management. We intend to argue the position that teaching and management cannot be the same. In spite of the advancement of the knowledge and practice of educational management, the search for a more effective and efficient management of the education input in the United States of America, for example, may illustrate the writer's contention that expenditure seems to be unrelated to desired educational goals. Wickline, 1975, quoted the exchange between the late Senator Robert F. Kennedy and Mr. Harold Howe, the Commissioner of Education in 1966, and stated, "What have you accomplished with the $1 billion that you got for elementary and secondary education last year?" In reply, Commissioner Howe began listing the number of books that had been purchased, the amount of money that had been expended for teachers, the amount of money that had been used for the purchase of equipment and materials, and so on. When he finished, Senator Kennedy was quite impatient and asked, "What happened to the children? Do you mean that you spent $1 billion and you don't know whether they can read or not?" As a consequence of the above, new functions and new terms such as accountability in education, program auditing, program accounting, etc., were introduced into the vocabulary of educational management. In any event, these new functions demanded more effort of the educational management personnel to maximize the achievement of desired educational goals through effective and efficient coordination of the efforts of the individuals in the logic of choice in the application of scarce means to alternative ends. Glasser, 1970. What is teaching? According to Stone and Schneider, 1971, teaching is assisting children and youth in their effort to develop an open mind and adaptability in the matter of ends. In short, the cultivation of competence in young people to fashion their own lives well. To this end, a teacher's role is to help children to acquire knowledge, develop skills and understanding, cultivate good work and study habits, appreciate aesthetics, and realize their innate and creative abilities. Consequently, the teacher's dilemma in modern education is how to teach effectively to maximize the desired behavioral change in his students. As illustrated in Figure 1, the teacher plans, organizes, delivers, and evaluates instruction to ascertain whether learning takes place as the result of his good teaching. Cook et al., 1967, write, "Good teaching is vivid, memorable, relevant, sharpened by interesting details. Such teaching requires careful planning. It does not happen otherwise." What is management? Management is the organization of differing groups of professional people, educational facilities, and other vital educational resources, and the effective and efficient use of time to achieve desired educational goals. Biddle, 1980, gives the following breakdown in defining executive management. Management, the process of coordinating the resources and efforts of a diverse group of people so they can collectively fulfill the prescribed objectives of the organization to which they belong. Managers, those individuals within an organization who are assigned the responsibility for coordinating the management process. Management process, the functions unique to management of planning, organizing, activating, and controlling that managers perform in carrying out their responsibilities. Executives, those superior managers who have risen to the middle and upper levels of management in an organization. Writing about the unique role of executive leadership in management, this writer stresses that the heart of the executive role is dealing with people. Within the framework of the above definition, the manager's job in the education business is complex and multifaceted. A few of the examples listed below will suffice, since it will not be possible to list in this article all that the educational manager does and he is expected to do. He is interested in how to get teachers and other professional employees of the education system committed to achieve the desired goals and objectives of the organization, institution, or nation. how to engage them more productively to maximize their achievement. 3. How to maximize scarce resources to facilitate maximum possible output. 4. How to evaluate performance progressively and upgrade the competence of those engaged on the job. 5. How to release the potential of each member of staff to enhance his confidence and how to help him to progress in his job. 6. How to create an atmosphere of high morale and its concomitant cooperation. This list can go on. However, it is clear from the above that the job of the manger is a web of complex tasks of leading people to make things happen through their efforts. Figure 1 may help to illustrate the functions of the management in education and the various factors impinging on these functions to facilitate or inhibit action. According to the figure, management falls into 3 major interrelated areas: development of goals, policies, and procedures. Some writers identify this area as planning, the process by which objectives are identified and procedures to carry them out are spelt out. We can thus subdivide this area into 2 functions: identification of objectives. Development of objectives for an institution is of primary importance, for it determines the direction of that institution. This identification and development of objectives delineates the responsibility of the manger into categorical statements of what is to be accomplished. This, therefore, leads us to what is called the principle of objectives, precisely stating and clearly determining the objectives in view before initiating any course of action. Programming. Programming is a setting up of a procedure by spelling out the means to be followed in the accomplishment of objectives. While objectives define what is to be accomplished, desired end, programming clearly sets the procedure to be followed, defining how that objective is going to be accomplished. 2. Conversion process or execution. Execution is the action area. It is the area in which the plan is translated to reach the desired ends through actual operation. Execution is divided into 5 functions: staffing, administration, coordination, supervision, and control. Staffing. Staffing is concerned with the identification, selection, and deployment of the right type of personnel in the right positions at the right time for an execution of a program. Through the organizational process, it spells out the manpower necessary to accomplish each individual portion of the program and is frequently described in terms of man-hours, class periods, to accomplish the given part of the program. It is dependent on the type of training and preparation the personnel have to accomplish the program and hence the objectives. Administration. Administration is the process of facilitating the smooth installation of the programming. Identification of the instruction and its clarification, accounting procedures, statistics, and materials necessary for the personnel to accomplish the program. C. Coordination. Coordination in the main is the guidance, leadership, and harmonization of the efforts made by the personnel. It is administrative because it strives to make sure that materials and programs are brought together into the proper place and time so that the right personnel assigned to accomplish a goal may carry out their proper activities at the right time. Coordination is also informing interested personnel whose activities may be affected by carrying through of the program, as well as notifying those personnel whose cooperation and active support is sought. D. Supervision. Supervision essentially is the help given to personnel to improve their competence for the jobs they are assigned to do. In institutions of learning, supervision is the process of improvement of releasing the teacher's potential, sound leadership, open communication, involvement in the curriculum development and various types of staff development, commonly known as in-service education for the teachers. Involvement of the teachers in instructional decision-making and decision-sharing and curricular change is one of the significant aspects of supervision. Figure 1. The process of teaching. E. Control. In management, there is a very significant aspect of the executive's work, which is control. An executive ensures the progress towards achievement of the overall objectives through constant feedback, how much has been done and how much more is yet to be done, on the piece of work each member of staff is assigned. Therefore, if all is progressing as it should be, he should have a clear picture of how the work of different members of staff interlinks to constitute the major goal. Therefore, 1. Control presumes knowledge of what is going on. 2. Knowledge of what is going on must be backed by facts. And 3. Facts must be measured and weighed constantly. 3. Goal achievement and evaluation. The third major area in Figure 1 gives one of the most important functions of management, dealing with the measurement of achievement. The manager has the responsibility of establishing targets and yardsticks to measure the contribution of each person's performance to the total organization. The analysis, examination, appraisal, and interpretation of each person's performance towards accomplishing the goals are shared with and communicated to all concerned. The extent of the difference. Although teaching and the management of education may appear the same superficially, see Figures 1 and 2, they are different in many ways. We will discuss these differences only as regards A. Aims and B. Professional training. In fulfilling his responsibilities, the teacher's main aim is effective teaching that will result in effective learning. Consequently, he is concerned about his competence in a subject matter area as well as skill in planning, delivering, and evaluating his teaching. Thus, his major aim is to strive to be one of what Stone and Schneider, 1971, call the future teacher, the most competent cores of professional persons the schools have ever known. Such competency, according to these writers, is grounded in substantial academic preparation and sound professional education in psychological, sociological, curricular, and applied aspects of teacher preparation. On the other hand, the aim of the manager is to coordinate the management process of the education business effectively and efficiently. Consequently, he is concerned about his complex roles of coordination and harmonization of the efforts of all the differing personnel, maintenance of links with other people both inside and outside his organization, using of resources wisely, and handling of crises both vital and trivial. Thus, he must be professionally competent enough to fulfill his responsibilities. Unlike a teacher, whose focus is on a fraction of the responsibility of a school, the manager, principal, has overall charge of the school, hence his survival depends upon his ability to carry out successfully his responsibilities. To do this, he must have various types of specific skills such as problem solving, information gathering, analysis, use in decision-making and dissemination, group leadership in meetings, time and change management, selection and development of staff, etc. Figure 2. The process of management. Professional preparation. Although there are wide variations in practices and requirements, almost every country has some form of training and licensing of teachers. The increasing importance of education for technological development and the sudden surge in the number of people to be educated may undoubtedly make the requirements for teacher training and certification increasingly important in the future. In any event, in spite of the variation in requirements, there are certain generally accepted areas of preparation for teachers. Teachers are expected to be well versed in the subject they teach, have a thorough understanding of humanities, the arts, and the sciences, have a professional knowledge in social and psychological foundations of education, the school curriculum, the methods and materials of instruction, and have been tried out through an assignment of practice teaching. The education management personnel may or may not be required to have acquired specialization in a teaching subject. They are usually generalists having a functional understanding of what is expected of a professional teacher. This means that they must be equipped with 1. A broad education through undergraduate study in humanities, the arts and sciences. 2. Adequate knowledge of the social and psychological foundations of education, the curriculum and the methods and materials of instruction, and 3. Basic concepts and principles of guidance and counseling. Such knowledge and background are necessary to maximize their effectiveness and efficiency in their practice of the profession of educational management. The actual requirements for the training of a professional management practitioner may also vary from place to place. However, Lulsegged, 1982, has suggested the following considerations for formulating the curriculum for such specialization: principles, procedures, and practices of educational management, planning, administration, supervision, performance and accountability, application of principles in solving educational problems, behavioral management, principles and action, economics of education, educational finance, business procedures and accountability, school plant construction and operation, curriculum, instructional principles and practices, educational psychology and sociology, child and adolescent growth and development, research techniques, professional literacy, spoken and written, awareness of the need for staff and management development programs. The extent of the differences shown above illustrate that although professional preparation for teaching with or without teaching experience may complement and supplement the professional practices of educational management, teaching experience alone is no longer an adequate prerequisite to entering leadership in education, and hence, the writer contends that teaching and management in education cannot be the same. Why educational management? Modern education is the single greatest activity in most third-world countries today. The philosophies, purposes, and goals of modern education have become much more complex than ever. The acquisition of knowledge alone is no longer enough. Understanding science and mastering technological skills have become imperative for modern men to improve their lot and sustain their nation. Johns et al. Gave the purposes of modern education as to contribute to the development of a dynamic, self-renewing society by assuming a major role in preparing the citizens, and especially the children and youth, to participate in and contribute effectively and constructively to the orderly development of that society. Consequently, if purposes such as the above are to be achieved in an effective and efficient manner, modern education enterprise calls for change in its management. The fact that today education is considered to be the basis for all social and economic development makes it a priority activity of any nation. According to Voice of America, VOA, 1982, it was reported that, beyond this role of economic productivity and overcoming poverty, furthermore, education develops reasons and curiosity, it builds the human mind and spirit. The importance of education and the quality of education in particular was stressed in the same report as, both the leaders and the masses of the developing countries have shown intuitive wisdom in their massive effect to extend schooling and extend its quality. Some of the changes which have resulted in educational management being considered as a branch of professional management are worth noting. External forces that have brought changes. Expanding population. Explosion of knowledge and scientific breakthroughs which are common everyday affairs. Technological developments which have changed our way of life and how we cope with these. Knowledge of research findings from the behavioral sciences and social sciences. Organizational theory and specialization of people. Public interest in education. Internal critical forces. Explosion of student enrollments and expansion of schools. Diversification of the school curricula and co-curricula activities. Professionalization of the teachers and the rise of teacher specialization. Application of technological developments in education. Rise and development of teacher labor unions and teacher militancy. Growth of organizational complexity, both administrative and instructional. Accountability in education and emphasis on behavioral objectives. The above are but a few examples of changes that have and are taking place throughout our world. These changes demand changes in the organization, administration, and supervision of the educational systems, if they are a. To serve the needs of individuals and their nations, b. To give adequate education to the many who are in school but receive inadequate education, VOA, 1982. C. To assist teachers in today's school to fulfill their needs to maintain a sense of perspective. Today, owing to growing complexity of education, teachers are being manipulated by far-flung forces. King Stoops, 1977, and D. To assist teachers help children acquire the best possible education. Further considerations. For further consideration of the contention of the writer of this article, interested educators must develop valid and reliable criteria to measure the job performance of the educational manager in terms of his own qualification, his staff's job satisfaction, commitment and motivation, his effectiveness in the allocation and use of resources and time, his ability to organize, administer, supervise, control, and evaluate. Ways of finding out how the objectives of the instruction are being achieved in terms of student behavioral changes, not only as evidenced by examination grades but also in terms of other things such as social, cultural, psychological, etc., adjustments, and the student's knowledge of what they can expect in life, and their emotional maturity. 3. Ways of knowing whether or not the manager helps the teachers and other educational staff set goals and develop plans of action for the achievements of goals and objectives, and how he does this. 4. Ways of knowing how the manager acts under strain and stress when faced with problems, such as student strikes, student failure to achieve the norms set, parents' dissatisfaction about certain aspects of the school, etc. 5. A good understanding of what climate of teaching and learning he has created for his organization and/or his institution. The list is endless. Nevertheless, the most important thing is that in most developed countries, particularly in the United States, where professionally qualified management personnel run the affairs of education, information concerning the above is abundant. However, the developing countries appear either to lack such information or to ignore it. In any event, such information, if diligently sought for, honestly examined, and objectively analyzed, may bring the evolutionary or revolutionary change imperative to modern educational management to support the increasing importance of education for technological and the corresponding economic and socio-political development. Conclusion. The leaders and the masses of the developing countries spend 15 to 30% of their total public expenditure on extending schooling and improving its quality, VOA, 1982, to realize knowledge which is, in Alfred Marshall's words, VOA, 1982, the most powerful engine of production. It enables us to subdue nature and satisfy our wants. Such an expensive, important concern cannot be left to chance, to teachers who have no specialization in educational administration and supervision, for its effective and efficient management. Teachers cannot, through teaching experience alone, have the requisite skills for leadership positions to effectively and efficiently run the affairs of modern education. Consequently, professionally trained, tested and seasoned educational administrators and supervisors are imperative prerequisites for the management of modern education. References. Biddle, 1980, What Every Executive Should Know. Alexander Hamilton Institute Corporate, New York. Cook, B. Caldwell, J.H. and Christensen, L.J., 1967, The Come Alive Classroom. Parker, New York. Duncan, W.J. 1978, Essentials of Management. Dryden Press, Hind Ale 3. Glasser, R. 1970, Training for Management, Outline Requirements. EP UNESCO. Paris. Gronland, N.E. 1974, Determining Accountability for Classroom Instruction. Macmillan, New York. Inbar, E. 1982, The Training of Educational Administrators, An Holistic Approach, Accepted for Publication. King Stoops, J. 1977, The Child Wants to Learn. Little, Brown, Boston. Lulsegged, E. H.M. 1982, Training Needs in Educational Administration in the Third World Countries. Paper presented at the conference of the 5th International Intervisitation Program in Educational Administration, 3 to 20 August, 1982, Badagry, Nigeria. Marks, Sir J. R. Stoop E. and King Stoops, J. 1978, Handbook of Educational Supervision, A Guide for the Practitioner. Allen and Bacon, Boston. Mopperfit, E.L., Johns, R.L., and Reller, T.L. 1974, Educational Organization and Administration. Concepts, Practices and Issues. Prentice Hall, Englewood Cliffs, N.J. Stoops, E. Rafferty, M. and Johnson, R.T. 1981, Handbook of Educational Administration, A Guide to the Practitioner. Allen and Bacon, Boston. Voice of America, 1982. Africa in Print, number 847. Washington, D.C. Wickline, L. E. 1971, Educational Accountability. Accountability through Evaluation.